My dad slammed the basement door in my face while my little brother screamed for help, then laughed with his lawyer friends when CPS believed him. When my sister had a seizure after weeks without food, my mom yelled, "She's manipulating you. She does this all the time." I stayed silent. That was 1 year ago. Yesterday, she collapsed in court and couldn't explain why I still won't look at her. Growing up as the oldest daughter meant that I was an expert at helping people who treated me like garbage. I was 10, and my youngest brother Eli was 4 when he was supposed to have his first day at school. But instead, he stayed home. Because while me and my other 2 siblings attended expensive private schools, Eli would be homeschooled. You see, Eli was a little quirky. He hated eye contact, had meltdowns over everything, and hated any change in routine. So despite having the kindest heart in the world, my parents were ashamed of him. Their favorite conversation topic consisted of expressing how happy they were that I was a good kid because it made up for the regret of having Eli. By the time I turned 14 and Eli was 8, things had gotten worse. What was meant to be his classroom in the basement was really just a playroom with no toys and locks on the outside. While my sister Madison and brother Tyler went to a $10,000 per year school with me, Eli stayed home with whatever nanny my mom hired that month. None of them lasted long because my parents never told them about Eli's needs. They just said he was difficult. It was around this time that I picked up my favorite hobby, learning to sneak downstairs when no one was looking to teach Eli basic math and English. Because when you worked with him properly, he was amazing. He just needed patience and understanding. 2 things my father, the hotshot family court lawyer, didn't have time for. And my mother was too busy with her charity boards to care about her actual charity case at home. And my plan was going smoothly, until it all came crashing down during my dad's annual holiday party. All his lawyer friends were in the living room, drinking expensive whiskey. I was upstairs doing homework, and that's when the screaming started. I instantly knew it was Eli. As I sprinted downstairs, my blood went cold. He had already started banging on the walls and hurting himself. But just before I could open the door, my dad caught me in the hallway. "Get back to your room," he said, his tone cold and assertive. But just before I could leave, Eli started screaming on the other side of the door, "I need help! Someone help me!" And I guess my dad realized his colleagues could hear what was going on because he completely froze. The house was so quiet you could practically hear the walls breathe. Suddenly, a smirk crept onto my face because Eli had somehow figured out how to call 911, and we could hear him telling the operator that his parents locked him up. My father ripped the phone away, but it was too late. In just minutes, our house was swarming with police and CPS workers. Hope filled my heart until my dad flashed his court ID badge. It's okay, I'm a family lawyer, so it's not uncommon for my clients to lie in their reports about me. I stared at the social worker with desperate eyes, trying to convince her to stay and talk, but she just smiled. "Oh, no problem, I understand," she said before leaving. I thought my dad's rich friends would say something, or at least be somewhat disturbed, but no. Instead, they started laughing. "Don't worry, the same thing happened to me last week," one of them said. "Kids are so spoiled nowadays," another chimed in. That evening, the case was determined as unfounded. I was grounded indefinitely for trying to ruin the family. But it wasn't just our parents that punished me and Eli. It was my younger sister Madison, too. She refused to call him anything other than the R slur, and constantly made loud noises to trigger a meltdown. My parents rewarded her with a new car for her loyalty. And after a while, my parents started blaming me for Eli. So much so that I was forced into therapy, which sounds good, except it was with my dad's friend who reported everything I said back to my parents. I knew I had to find a way out for Eli, but I had no idea how to help him. TBH, I was hoping the problem would go away by itself. And one day, it did. Because Madison failed her entrance exam to the elite high school, the one I helped her study for. Suddenly, Eli wasn't locked in the basement anymore. I was. And my parents started calling him their special boy and buying him toys. But instead of defending me, Eli joined in. When he spilled juice, he'd point at me and say, "She made me do it." When he had a meltdown, he'd scream, "It's her fault." And my parents ate it up every single time. But I wasn't filled with anger or sadness. Instead, I was happy. Because seeing Eli actually getting fed regularly and not crying himself to sleep was worth it. But one thing about my family is that nothing ever stays the same. But to my surprise, it was Tyler, the only one who'd been silent the whole time, who changed everything. One day, while I sat in the basement staring at the white wall trying not to think about how hungry I was, I heard something slip under the door. It was a phone. When I turned it on, I saw it was on the Notes app with just one thing written. "I've been recording everything for 2 years." Tyler's recordings included video evidence of Eli being locked in the basement, their parents forging homeschool documents, and most importantly, their father coaching witnesses before the CPS visit. I spent hours reviewing the footage while Tyler kept watch upstairs, knocking 3 times whenever someone approached the basement door. Our mother discovered Tyler's involvement when she found him sneaking food to me and immediately confiscated his devices, but Tyler had already uploaded everything to multiple cloud accounts. Our parents hired a family friend named David, who was a tech expert, to wipe all devices and recover the footage, offering him $10,000 to destroy the evidence. David found some of the cloud accounts, but Tyler had hidden the main backup in an old email account our parents didn't know existed. Madison discovered the basement key hidden in Tyler's room and tried to blackmail him into deleting everything in exchange for not telling our parents, but Tyler recorded her threats too. Our father started pressuring me to sign documents stating I had mental health issues and needed residential treatment, bringing different forms every day, and withholding food until I agreed. I pretended to have a seizure during one of these sessions, causing enough chaos for Tyler to call our Aunt Rebecca, who lived 2 hours away. Rebecca arrived demanding to see all 4 children, but our parents claimed I was at a friend's house and wouldn't let her inside. Tyler managed to show Rebecca one video on his hidden phone during a bathroom break, and she immediately called CPS herself as a concerned relative. This time, a different social worker worker named Ms. Coleman arrived, one who wasn't intimidated by our father's credentials and insisted on interviewing each child separately. Our parents tried to coach Eli, but his autism made him terrible at lying, and he kept contradicting himself, eventually breaking down and saying he missed his sister and wanted her back from the basement. Ms. Coleman demanded to search the house and found me locked in the basement, malnourished and surrounded by the forged documents our father had been trying to make me sign. Our parents claimed I had locked myself in as a manipulation tactic, but Tyler played the audio recordings of them discussing keeping me there. Madison finally broke and admitted she had been scared to speak up, providing her own testimony about years of witnessing Eli's neglect. The special education advocate from the homeschool inspection returned with Ms. Coleman and determined Eli had been educationally neglected for 4 years, unable to perform basic tasks for his age. Both parents were arrested for child abuse and neglect, with our father facing additional charges for falsifying legal documents and witness tampering. All 4 children were temporarily placed with Aunt Rebecca while the investigation continued, and Eli finally received proper autism testing and support services. Our father lost his law license when the recordings revealed he had used his position to manipulate the system, and several of his past custody cases were reopened for review. Our mother's charity positions disappeared overnight once the truth came out, leaving her with nothing but legal bills and a destroyed reputation. Tyler's 2 years of careful documentation led to both parents receiving prison sentences, and Aunt Rebecca gained permanent custody of all 4 siblings. I started my junior year at a public school where no one knew my family's history. Tyler became interested in journalism and protecting others who couldn't protect themselves. Madison began volunteering with special needs children to make amends for her past cruelty, and Eli thrived in a specialized education program where he finally learned to read and write at age 9, always crediting his oldest sister as his first real teacher. The first few weeks at Aunt Rebecca's house felt surreal. We each had our own bedroom, ate 3 meals a day at regular times, and nobody locked doors from the outside. Rebecca worked as a nurse and had to rearrange her entire schedule to accommodate 4 traumatized kids, but she never complained. She just kept making pancakes every morning and asking if we needed anything. Our parents posted bail within days. The judge set conditions that they couldn't contact us directly, but that didn't stop them from trying everything else. Their lawyer, a colleague of my father's named Mr. Henderson, filed emergency motions claiming Rebecca was an unfit guardian. He argued she worked too many hours, lived in a modest 3-bedroom house, and had no experience raising children. The irony of my parents claiming someone else was unfit wasn't lost on me. Rebecca hired her own lawyer with money she didn't have, taking out loans against her house. The first hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after our placement. During that time, my mother's sister Catherine started showing up at Rebecca's house unannounced. She'd stand on the lawn taking pictures of the property, documenting every devil's lettuce in the garden and every paint chip on the fence. When Rebecca asked her to leave, Catherine would cry about how we were being brainwashed against our loving parents. Tyler set up security cameras using old phones, creating a network that recorded every visit. He showed me footage of Catherine trying to peer through windows when she thought no one was watching. Madison caught her attempting to talk to Eli through the backyard fence one afternoon, promising him candy if he'd tell the judge he wanted to go home. Eli had started to understand that home wasn't safe anymore, but the confusion in his eyes when Catherine mentioned our parents made my chest tight. The school situation proved complicated. Rebecca lived in a different district, and transferring 4 kids mid-year required mountains of paperwork. The private school my siblings and I had attended wouldn't release our records without our parents' signature. It took intervention from Mrs. Coleman to get temporary educational placements. I started at the local public high school 3 weeks late, carrying a backpack Rebecca bought at Goodwill because our parents had canceled the credit cards they'd given us for emergencies. Walking into that school felt like entering another universe. Nobody knew about the basement or the recordings. I was just the new girl who showed up in October with hollow cheeks and secondhand clothes. A girl named Loss in my chemistry class offered to share her textbook when she noticed I didn't have one yet. Her simple kindness made me excuse myself to cry in the bathroom. Meanwhile, our parents hired a private investigator to follow Rebecca. We'd spot the same sedan parked outside the grocery store, the pharmacy, wherever we went. Tyler documented every sighting, adding to his ever-growing collection of evidence. The investigator even showed up at Eli's new special education program, trying to question teachers about his progress. The school had to issue a no trespass order. The smear campaign intensified on social media. Our mother's charity friends posted about how devastated she was to lose her precious children to a vindictive relative. They shared old family photos from before everything fell apart, when we still looked like the perfect family in matching Christmas sweaters. People who didn't know the truth commented with prayers and support for my parents. Madison spent hours reporting posts and correcting lies, but new ones appeared faster than she could address them. Our father's colleagues from the holiday party submitted character references to the court, describing him as a dedicated family man. They conveniently forgot to mention the screaming they'd heard from the basement that night. Mr. Henderson used these letters to argue that the criminal charges were a misunderstanding that would be cleared up at trial. He painted Tyler's recordings as manipulated evidence from a troubled teenager seeking attention. The first family court hearing arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Rebecca had to take unpaid time off work, adding to her financial stress. She'd bought us secondhand court clothes from a thrift store, making sure we looked presentable. Tyler wore his father's old tie, which Rebecca had shortened for him. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Our parents arrived in designer suits, flanked by 3 lawyers. My mother had lost weight and styled herself to look fragile and victimized. My father maintained his professional composure, nodding to court staff like he was arriving for work rather than fighting to regain custody of children he'd abused. They sat at their table whispering with their legal team, occasionally glancing our way with expressions of practiced sorrow. The judge, an older woman named named Judge Martinez, reviewed the emergency custody order. Mr. Henderson immediately launched into arguments about Rebecca's fitness as a guardian. He presented photos Catherine had taken, highlighting the modest size of the house and the unkempt yard. He questioned how a single woman working 12-hour nursing shifts could properly supervise 4 children with varying needs. Rebecca's lawyer, Ms. Chen, countered with documentation of the adjustments Rebecca had made. She'd switched to day shifts, enrolled us in appropriate schools, and secured therapy appointments for each of us. Ms. Chen presented receipts showing Rebecca had spent her savings on our needs, while our parents had frozen every account we might access. The guardian ad litem assigned to our case, Mrs. Patel, had interviewed each of us separately. She reported that we were adamant about not returning to our parents' home. However, Mr. Henderson argued we'd been influenced by Rebecca and needed deprogramming from the false narrative we'd been fed. He actually used the word deprogramming, like we'd joined a cult rather than escaped abuse. Judge Martinez ordered a full custody evaluation, appointing Dr. Reeves to assess both households. This meant more interviews, home visits, and psychological testing. The process would take months, during which we'd remain with Rebecca under temporary orders. Our parents were granted supervised visitation at a county facility, 2 hours every other Saturday. The thought of seeing them again made my stomach churn. The financial pressure on Rebecca mounted daily. Legal fees, therapy costs, and supporting 4 kids on a nurse's salary stretched her beyond breaking. She started picking up extra shifts when we were at school, coming home exhausted but still helping with homework. I overheard her on the phone with the bank, negotiating payment plans for the loans she'd taken out. Our parents, meanwhile, liquidated assets to fund their legal battle. They sold the vacation home and my mother's jewelry collection, portraying themselves as desperate parents willing to sacrifice everything for their children. Mr. Henderson filed motion after motion, each requiring responses that cost Rebecca more money she didn't have. It was a war of attrition, and they had deeper pockets. Tyler discovered our father had hired a technology expert to challenge the authenticity of his recordings. This expert, Dr. Morrison, claimed the videos could have been edited or staged. Tyler spent hours creating detailed documentation of when and how each recording was made, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Mr. Henderson began referring to the alleged evidence in court filings. The supervised visitation started 3 weeks after the initial hearing. The county facility looked like a cross between a daycare and a police station, with colorful murals on the walls and security cameras in every corner. A social worker named Ms. Johnson would observe every interaction, taking notes on a clipboard that never left her hands. That first visit, our parents arrived with gifts and tears. My mother hugged each of us like we'd been kidnapped rather than rescued. My father spoke in the warm, concerned tone he used with clients, asking about school and friends as if we were having a normal conversation. They'd been coached by their lawyers on exactly what to say and how to act. Eli struggled the most during these visits. The change in routine upset him, and our parents' sudden affection confused him after years of neglect. He'd rock in his chair and refuse to make eye contact, which our mother documented as evidence that Rebecca wasn't meeting his needs. When Eli had a meltdown during the 3rd visit, our father calmly comforted him while shooting meaningful looks at Ms. Johnson's clipboard. Madison surprised everyone by refusing to play along. When our mother tried to give her a designer purse as a gift, Madison pushed it back across the table. She told Ms. Johnson about the car they'd bought her for bullying Eli, about the R word they'd encouraged her to use. Our parents' faces remained composed, but I saw our father's jaw tighten the way it did before he used to send us to the basement. The custody evaluator, Dr. Reeves, began his assessment with home visits. He toured Rebecca's modest house, noting the bunk beds she'd bought and the homework station she'd set up in the dining room. He observed our daily routines, the way Rebecca made sure Eli had his noise-canceling headphones for overwhelming moments, how she checked Tyler's recordings were safely backed up each night. When Dr. Reeves visited our parents' house, they'd transformed it into a therapeutic environment. The basement had been renovated into a sensory room for Eli, complete with soft lighting and calming colors. They'd hired an autism specialist to consult on the design. My old room had been preserved exactly as I'd left it, down to the homework still on my desk, as if I might return any moment. Our parents presented Dr. Reeves with binders of documentation, therapy appointments they'd scheduled, parenting classes they'd enrolled in, letters from specialists they'd consulted about Eli's needs. They admitted to making mistakes but framed it as ignorance rather than abuse. They were just overwhelmed parents who'd needed help, not criminals who'd locked their children in basements. The psychological testing was exhausting. Hours of questions about our feelings, our memories, our hopes for the future. Dr. Reeves asked me to draw pictures of our family, to complete stories about fictional children in various situations. He watched for signs of coaching, for inconsistencies in our accounts. I told the truth, but truth can sound rehearsed when you've repeated it to so many professionals. Our extended family began choosing sides. Our father's brother sent letters to the court supporting him, claiming the family had always been loving and stable. Our mother's parents, who lived across the country, offered to take custody themselves if Rebecca proved unfit. They'd visited us exactly twice in my entire life, but suddenly they were concerned grandparents desperate to help. The pressure affected each of us differently. Tyler threw himself into documenting everything, creating spreadsheets of incidents and backing up files in increasingly creative ways. Madison joined a support group for siblings of special needs children, trying to process her guilt over years of cruelty. Eli began making progress in his specialized program, finally learning to write his name at age 9, but the stress of visits caused regular setbacks. I struggled with nightmares about the basement. Rebecca found me sleepwalking one night, trying to unlock doors that weren't locked. She started leaving nightlights in the hallway and checking on me during her 3 a.m. water breaks. The therapy helped, but healing isn't linear. Some days I felt strong and confident. Others, I couldn't eat because my stomach remembered being being empty for so long. Our parents' criminal trial was postponed twice, their lawyers filing continuances while building their defense. The family court case proceeded slowly, each hearing bringing new motions and delays. Mr. Henderson argued that the criminal and custody cases should be resolved together, hoping an acquittal would strengthen their position. Ms. Chen fought to keep them separate, knowing our safety shouldn't depend on criminal court standards of proof. 4 months into our placement with Rebecca, the financial strain reached a breaking point. She'd maxed out her credit cards and taken a second mortgage on her house. Ms. Chen had reduced her fees as much as possible, but court costs kept mounting. I overheard Rebecca on the phone with her supervisor, begging for more overtime hours that didn't exist. That's when something unexpected happened. Loss from chemistry class invited me to her house for a study group. Her mother, Mrs. McNicholas, was a paralegal at a family law firm. When she heard about our situation, she connected Rebecca with her boss, who agreed to take the case pro bono. Suddenly, we had a legal team that could match our parents' resources. The tide began to turn during the next hearing. Our new lawyers filed a motion to admit Tyler's recordings as evidence, supported by their own technology expert who verified their authenticity. They also subpoenaed records from the private investigator our parents had hired, revealing he'd been instructed to find dirt on Rebecca by any means necessary. Dr. Reeves submitted his preliminary report, which was more neutral than we'd hoped but contained crucial observations. He noted that while our parents had made recent changes, we children showed signs of long-term trauma consistent with our accounts. He expressed concern about their failure to recognize Eli's needs for years and questioned whether their newfound awareness was genuine or strategic. Our parents' response was to escalate. They filed complaints against Rebecca's nursing license, claiming she was too unstable to care for patients if she couldn't properly supervise children. They reported her to child services for educational neglect when I missed 2 days of school with the flu. Each complaint required investigation, adding more stress to our daily lives. Catherine increased her harassment, now bringing other family members to stand outside Rebecca's house. They'd hold signs saying, "Return our children," and post live videos on social media about their vigil for justice. Tyler's cameras captured everything, including Catherine attempting to leave letters in our mailbox in violation of the no-contact order. The breaking point came during a supervised visit when our father slipped Eli a note. Ms. Johnson caught it immediately, a letter telling Eli that if he said he wanted to come home, they'd buy him all the trains he wanted and he'd never have to go to school. The manipulation was so blatant that Ms. Johnson ended the visit early and filed an incident report. That incident report changed everything. Judge Martinez ordered an emergency hearing where she reviewed the attempted bribery along with all the other evidence that had accumulated. She expressed frustration with our parents' continued attempts to manipulate the system, rather than genuinely address the issues that led to our removal. Our mother broke down during that hearing, not with the practiced tears she'd shown before, but with raw, ugly sobs. She admitted she'd been overwhelmed and had made terrible choices, but when pressed about why she'd locked me in the basement for failing to keep Eli quiet, she still insisted it was discipline for my defiance rather than abuse. The admission, even partial, was damning. Mr. Henderson tried to salvage the situation by proposing a gradual reunification plan with extensive oversight. He suggested we could start with overnight visits, then weekends, building up to full custody over a year. The proposal included family therapy, parenting coaches, and regular check-ins with the court. It sounded reasonable on paper, like a path toward healing our broken family. But Tyler stood up in court that day, something children rarely do in custody hearings. He asked to address the judge directly, and Judge Martinez allowed it. His voice shook as he described years of watching Eli locked away, of staying silent out of fear, of finally finding the courage to document the truth. He pulled out a printed email our father had sent him the night before through a fake account, threatening that Tyler would regret betraying his family. That email violated the no-contact order and showed our parents still didn't understand the gravity of their actions. Judge Martinez ordered both parents remanded into custody immediately for contempt of court. As bailiffs approached, our mother reached toward us, calling our names with genuine desperation. But we sat frozen, a row of damaged children who'd learned not to trust her tears. The criminal trial proceeded with our parents in jail, unable to post the higher bail set for violating court orders. Their lawyers argued this prejudiced the family court case, but Judge Martinez scheduled the final custody hearing anyway. She'd seen enough delays and manipulations. It was time for decisions. Rebecca testified about the changes she'd witnessed in us, how I'd gone from hoarding food to helping cook family dinners, how Tyler had started laughing again instead of constantly looking over his shoulder, how Madison had become protective of Eli instead of cruel, how Eli had begun to trust that adults could keep him safe. Her voice broke when she described finding me trying to sleep in the closet my first week, afraid of open spaces after months in the basement. Our therapist testified about our treatment progress and ongoing needs. Eli's special education team presented his academic growth, showing work samples that proved he was capable of learning when given proper support. The guardian ad litem recommended permanent custody with Rebecca, noting that returning to our parents would likely undo months of healing. When the criminal verdicts came down, guilty on all counts, our parents' last hope for regaining custody crumbled. The judge in that trial called their treatment of us, particularly Eli, unconscionable. He sentenced our father to 5 years and our mother to 3, with possibility of parole in half that time. Their lawyers immediately filed appeals, but the convictions stood. Judge Martinez's final custody ruling was comprehensive. She terminated our parents' rights, citing egregious abuse and their continued attempts to manipulate rather than rehabilitate. She granted Rebecca permanent guardianship with the option to adopt if we chose. She ordered our parents to have no contact until we turned 18 and could decide for ourselves whether to rebuild those relationships. The relief I felt was physical, like a weight lifting off my chest that I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it was there. Tyler hugged me for the first time in years. Madison held Eli's hand as he flapped his other arm in joy, not trying to stop his stimming but celebrating with him. Rebecca cried openly, exhausted but victorious. But victory in family court isn't like movies where everything suddenly becomes perfect. We still had therapy appointments and homework, and Eli's meltdowns and trauma responses that would take years to fully address. Rebecca still had massive debt from the legal fight and a house too small for 5 people. We still had extended family who believed we'd destroyed our parents' lives for attention. What we also had was safety. The locks in Rebecca's house kept danger out instead of trapping us in. We had consistency, meals at regular times, school every day, bedtime routines that didn't change based on our parents' moods. We had adults who put our needs first, teachers who understood our challenges, therapists who believed our experiences. The adoptions were finalized a year later in a small ceremony at the courthouse. Rebecca had asked each of us separately if it was what we wanted, making clear she'd love us the same either way. But we all said yes. Tyler designed adoption announcements on his computer. Madison baked a cake from scratch. Eli drew pictures of our new family, 5 stick figures holding hands with smiles that took up half their faces. I chose to keep my last name, not out of loyalty to my parents, but because it was mine. The others made their own choices. Tyler hyphenated, Madison took Rebecca's name entirely, and Eli decided he wanted to be Eli Rebecca Johnson because he could choose more than one name if he wanted. The judge smiled at that logic and made it official. We received letters from prison occasionally, forwarded through lawyers since direct contact was prohibited. Our mother wrote about finding faith and wanting forgiveness. Our father sent legal documents trying to assert some remaining parental rights from his cell. Rebecca filed them all away in case we ever wanted to read them, but she never pressured us either way. Some extended family members eventually came around, especially after seeing the criminal trial evidence. Our maternal grandmother started sending birthday cards and small gifts, trying to build relationships she'd never prioritized before. Others remained convinced we were ungrateful children who'd betrayed good parents. We learned to live with their judgment. The adoption ceremony marked a new beginning, but our challenges were far from over. 2 weeks later, Catherine showed up at my high school during lunch. She approached me in the cafeteria, tears streaming down her face, begging me to visit my mother in prison. The security guard had to escort her out when she grabbed my arm and wouldn't let go. Loss and her friends formed a protective circle around me until she was gone. Tyler discovered Catherine had been contacting other students at our schools through social media, sending them articles about false abuse allegations and wrongful convictions. Madison's locker was vandalized with the word liar spray painted across it. Eli came home from his special education program crying because someone had left a photo of our parents under his desk with "They miss you" written on the back. Rebecca immediately contacted the schools and filed harassment reports. The principals implemented new security measures, but we couldn't be protected everywhere. I started noticing the same car following my bus route home. Tyler confirmed it was our father's brother, Marcus, who'd been documenting our daily routines and posting updates to a private Facebook group called Justice for Good Parents. The harassment escalated when Rebecca received a certified letter. Our grandparents were filing for visitation rights, claiming grandparent alienation. Their lawyer argued that regardless of our parents' actions, we children deserved relationships with extended family. The letter included photos of a bedroom they'd prepared for Eli, complete with train sets and sensory equipment. Rebecca's lawyer advised us that grandparent rights cases were complicated. Even with our parents' convictions, courts sometimes granted limited visitation to grandparents who could prove prior relationships. The fact that they'd rarely visited us before actually worked in our favor, but we'd still need to go through another round of court proceedings. I found Tyler in his room that night, organizing his recordings into categories. He'd started a new project, documenting every instance of harassment since the adoption. His laptop contained folders labeled by date, person, and type of incident. He showed me screenshots of the Facebook group where family members discussed strategies to rescue us from Rebecca. Madison had been handling things differently. She'd written letters to every family member who'd participated in the harassment, explaining how their actions were hurting us. Most never responded, but our father's sister Sarah wrote back. She admitted she'd been wrong to blindly support our parents, and asked if she could apologize in person. Rebecca supervised a meeting at a local restaurant where Sarah broke down crying, saying she'd had no idea about the basement. The grandparent visitation hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Rebecca had to take another unpaid day off work, and we all missed school again. Our grandparents arrived looking frail and sympathetic, their lawyer painting them as heartbroken elderly people denied access to their grandchildren. They testified about birthday cards they'd sent and phone calls they'd tried to make. Our lawyer countered with evidence of their minimal involvement in our lives before our parents' arrest. She presented records showing they'd visited twice in 15 years and had never sent birthday cards until after the custody case began. When asked why they hadn't intervened when Eli was being homeschooled without proper documentation, they claimed they hadn't known. The judge ordered a home study of our grandparents' house. The social worker found they'd converted their entire guest room into a child's bedroom just weeks before filing for visitation. They'd hired the same autism specialist our parents had used to design Eli's fake sensory room. The calculated nature of their preparation actually worked against them. During this time, I was struggling to keep up with schoolwork. The constant court dates and emotional stress made it hard to focus on calculus and essay assignments. Loss's mother, Mrs. McNicholas, offered to tutor me after school. She'd been a teacher before becoming a paralegal and understood how legal battles could derail education. One afternoon, while studying at their house, Mrs. McNicholas mentioned she'd been researching our case for her law firm. She'd found similar cases where extended family harassment had resulted in restraining orders. She offered to help Rebecca's lawyer prepare the documentation pro bono. Within a week, we had protective orders against Catherine, Marcus, and 3 other relatives. The restraining orders didn't stop the indirect harassment. Our parents' supporters created a website called The Truth About the Basement Children, featuring old family photos and character testimonials. They posted our school names and Rebecca's work address, encouraging people to investigate for themselves. Rebecca had to change her shifts after protesters showed up at the hospital. Tyler worked with our lawyer to get the website taken down for doxing minors. It took 3 weeks of legal notices, but eventually the hosting company removed it. The domain owner turned out to be a family friend who'd attended our father's holiday parties. He retaliated by posting flyers around town with our family photo and falsely accused in red letters. Eli regressed during this period. The stability he'd found at Rebecca's house was shaken by the constant changes and security measures. He started having meltdowns at school again and refused to go to his therapy appointments. Rebecca spent hours sitting with him, using the calming techniques his specialists had taught her, but progress was slow. I overheard Rebecca on the phone with her sister one night, voice breaking as she described the toll everything was taking. She'd lost weight from stress and wasn't sleeping well. Her supervisor at the hospital had been understanding, but there were limits to how many schedule changes they could accommodate. She was considering taking a lower-paying position with regular hours. The next morning, Tyler called a family meeting. He'd been researching our options and found that we could file a civil suit against family members for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The money could help Rebecca with the debt from the custody battle and ongoing security needs. Madison immediately supported the idea, but I worried about escalating things further. Rebecca left the decision to us. She said she'd support whatever we chose but wanted us to understand the implications. More court battles meant more time in the public eye, more opportunities for harassment, more stress on all of us. But it might also send a message that there were consequences for trying to intimidate children who'd already been through trauma. We decided to start with cease and desist letters to the most aggressive family members. Our lawyer sent formal notices warning of potential legal action if the harassment continued. Most backed off immediately, but Catherine doubled down. She started a petition to have Rebecca investigated for alienating us from our loving family. The petition gained little traction, but Catherine managed to get a local blogger interested in the story. He wrote a piece questioning whether we'd been coached to lie about our parents. The blog post included photos taken from Catherine's surveillance of Rebecca's house and speculation about Tyler's recordings being fabricated. Comments poured in from strangers debating our family's story. Tyler wanted to release some of his recordings to prove the truth, but our lawyer advised against it. The evidence was part of ongoing criminal appeals and couldn't be made public. We had to endure the speculation and lies without being able to defend ourselves with the proof we had. The frustration was overwhelming. School became my escape. Loss and her friends had formed a protective bubble around me, sitting with me at lunch and walking me between classes. Teachers who'd heard about the situation gave me extensions when needed. The normalcy of homework and tests felt like a blessing compared to the chaos at home. Madison threw herself into her volunteer work with special needs children. She'd started at a local center that provided respite care for families. Working with kids who reminded her of Eli helped her process her guilt. She came home with stories about breakthrough moments and challenges, slowly rebuilding her identity as someone who protected rather than hurt vulnerable children. The grandparent visitation case concluded with a ruling in our favor. The judge found that our grandparents had shown no genuine interest in our welfare until after our parents' conviction. She noted their preparations seemed designed to impress the court rather than meet our actual needs. The petition was denied, and they were warned against further legal action. Our father attempted one last manipulation from prison. He filed a motion claiming ineffective counsel in his criminal case, arguing his lawyer hadn't properly challenged Tyler's recordings. If successful, it could lead to a new trial. The motion was ultimately denied, but not before we endured weeks of anxiety about potentially testifying again. As the 1-year anniversary of our removal approached, Rebecca suggested we do something to mark how far we'd come. Tyler proposed a camping trip, something we'd never done as a family before. We rented a cabin a few hours away, somewhere none of our relatives would think to look for us. For 3 days, we hiked, roasted marshmallows, and played board games. On the last night of the trip, sitting around the campfire, Eli spoke up unexpectedly. He thanked each of us for helping him learn to read. He pulled out a book he'd been hiding in his backpack, one he'd checked out from the library himself, and read us a story about trains. His voice was clear and confident, only stumbling on a few words. We all cried. The drive home felt different. The constant weight of surveillance and harassment hadn't disappeared, but we'd proven we could build moments of peace despite it. Rebecca had figured out how to juggle her work schedule. Tyler had systems in place to document any incidents. Madison had found purpose in helping others. Eli was learning and growing. I was catching up in school. 3 months later, our parents' appeals were exhausted. They would serve their full sentences. Some family members finally accepted the reality and quietly distanced themselves from the campaign against us. Others remained convinced we were liars who destroyed an innocent family, but their efforts became less coordinated. Rebecca refinanced her house to consolidate the legal debts. The monthly payments were manageable now that the court battles had ended. She'd taken the lower-paying position at the hospital for the stable hours. We qualified for free lunch at school and learned to shop at thrift stores without shame. Financial stability mattered less than emotional security. Tyler graduated high school with honors and a scholarship to study journalism at the State University. His application essay about the power of documentation to protect the vulnerable impressed admissions committees. He planned to live at home and commute to save money. Madison entered her senior year determined to become a special education teacher. Her volunteer work had shown her a path to redemption through service. I focused on my own senior year, finally able to think about the future beyond the next court date. Loss helped me study for the SATs, and Mrs. McNicholas reviewed my college essays. I wrote about resilience without mentioning the specific details of our story. The guidance counselor said it was one of the strongest personal personal statements she'd read. Eli continued to exceed expectations in his specialized program. He'd made friends who understood his sensory needs and joined a social skills group that met weekly. He still had hard days, but they were becoming less frequent. He'd started expressing interest in computers, and Tyler was teaching him basic coding. The letters from prison still arrived occasionally. Rebecca kept them filed away as she'd promised. None of us felt ready to read them. Maybe someday we would want to understand what our parents were thinking. Maybe we'd need closure. But for now, we were focused on moving forward, not looking back. Our story wasn't unique. Thousands of children faced similar situations with less support and fewer resources. We'd been lucky to have Tyler's foresight, Rebecca's courage, and eventually, a legal system that worked. Not every child locked in a basement found their way to safety. Not every aunt stepped up to raise 4 traumatized kids. As I prepared my college applications, I thought about what I wanted to study. Psychology interested me, but so did law and social work. Law suggested I didn't have to decide immediately. General education requirements would give me time to explore. What mattered was that I had choices now, something that had seemed impossible when I was teaching Eli in secret. The extended family harassment had mostly faded to occasional social media posts we could ignore. The restraining orders remained in place, providing legal protection if needed. Catherine had moved to another state, claiming she couldn't bear to live in the same town where such injustice had occurred. Other relatives simply pretended we didn't exist. Rebecca started dating a fellow nurse who understood our complicated family dynamic. He came to dinner once a week, bringing dessert and board games. Eli warmed up to him slowly, and Tyler ran background checks that came back clean. It felt strange to see Rebecca happy in a way that wasn't just about our survival.